there was a time when I would have been incredibly excited to play a new Halo game. But then there was always a staple within every single Halo game, and that was a great campaign. However, in 2015, this tradition was soullessly destroyed by Halo 5. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't fun to play as like a Halo game, because like mechanics-wise, the game was almost the exact same, but the story really lacked, and considering this was the main reason I play the games, I wasn't too impressed. And I'll be completely honest, I try to be as unbiased as I physically can be when it comes to talking about games on here, because I personally believe that everything deserves a chance, and not every game is designed for me. But I was very biased going into this game, and in all honesty, all of that was stripped away from me within less than an hour of playing it. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a couple of things that I found to be really weird, but this honestly managed to bring life back to the Halo franchise in a way that I did not expect. Now, just before we jump into it, there's a few bits that I want to talk about within this game. So this video is going to be split into two sections, the first one being the single player portion of the game, or the campaign, and then the second section will be based on the multiplayer, something that Halo is incredibly famous for, but don't worry, this video will be completely spoiler free. So let's start it off by talking about how the game plays, because that comes down to two major components. First, the style of gameplay, and then the way that the game actually looks. Now, they managed to completely change the general layout of a Halo game, and to be honest, I'm not even mad. They've managed to turn a story game that is usually very linear into a slightly less linear counterpart. It now has a lot of aspects of a free roam game, which is something that I didn't really think would work for a game like Halo, but somehow they've managed to pull it off and they've completely knocked it out of the park. This game follows a very easy pattern. You start off in some form of tutorial, then you come out into the world after some incredible cinematics, and the open world gives you some interesting things to do, as well as a few different mechanics to explore. Like, my favourite addition to the game is most likely the grappling hook. You'll be able to see a lot of that in action throughout the video, although it wasn't really a standard throughout the other games in the Halo franchise, but I do think it worked a lot better in this game, just because of how different the gameplay is. There are so many sections of this game where you have to traverse ridiculous terrain or have to travel large distances, so I feel like it fits really well. Because in this game that they've taken the open world approach, they've added in a lot of small side quests for you to do, as well as adding in a fast travel system. So the fast travel system works in an interesting way. They've added these things called FOBs, which are basically small hubs that you go to and you reclaim from the Banished, and then you convert them to your own. So not only do these work as fast travel points, but they also work as like a weird hub for you to be able to call in supplies. So this is where you'd get like guns and vehicles from on the fly. And the way that the armory works, although it's a bit strange, I can completely understand why they've done it. In order to unlock things, you can call in, you have to gain points from your party. You do that by doing like missions and side quests. I guess that's the way they can kind of justify it, by saving more of the UNSC, you're allowing yourself more resources? Probably? It's not just that they don't want you to have all the best equipment at the start of the game or anything, like, I'm sure that's not the reason. But the one thing that I did find a bit pointless for the majority of the game is that you have the vehicles. So in the old games they made sense when they were, because you had to use them to get throughout like sections of the mission in order to progress that little bit quicker. But as I said earlier, the terrain in this game is terrible. So for the most part it was actually a lot easier to just run around and use the grappling hook. But the vehicles did come in useful, especially towards the end of the campaign, but for the most part I just found them to be a little bit useless. Whilst we're talking about terrain though, I just want to stop to say that this world is beautiful. If you have played a Halo game before, you should know the generic rule of where these games are based, but if you don't, I'll catch you up really quick. So the games are mainly based on these things called halos. I know, go figure, right? It's basically a massive ring in space. It's got its own ecosystem, but they were designed to be weapons. Well, this game is still based on one of those. Again, go figure. But this Halo is broken. So after the events of the last few games, it's basically just trying to make sure that people have survived, and that's really on both sides of the coin. But because the Halo has been broken, it leaves some really interesting terrain. Like, you have the ecosystem that's still kind of functioning, but then there's also massive sections where you can just see overexposed tech in the form of like these hexagon pillars. It's really interesting to see that dynamic, as although we've been aware that it is technically just a massive ring of machinery, You've never seen it before in any of the previous Halo games. This game is honestly stunning though. I played it on PC, and although I did encounter a few bugs, the majority of the game was just incredible to look at, and in all honesty, with the way that the industry keeps growing, I'm continuing to be more and more impressed with every single new release. Back into the open world. The map is pretty big, and it's basically set up into sections, like they've added a load of standalone things to do in order to pass the time, as well as the collectibles. So we've already spoken about the FOBs, but there's also a few other bits that kind of add up together. I do think that as this is a completely new concept for them, they really haven't mastered the art of open world games. Like, it still seems very limited, but I honestly do think that they've done a great job. So the main collectibles that they've added to the open world are the voice notes, which are just standard throughout most games, the skulls, which are standard throughout most Halo games. I mean, why would you play a Halo game that didn't include Grunt's birthday party, right? There's nothing more satisfying than shooting a grunt in the face and just being greeted by a face full of confetti. They've also added these armory locations. These mainly just give you cosmetic options, which again are a staple for all Halo games, except for maybe the Halo Wars series. They've added a new thing called Spartan cores, which are basically bits that you go around and collect in order to upgrade your abilities. Now in the last few Halo games you've been given abilities in some form, and in this game they're all inside of your armour instead of having to swap them out. This is both really weird and really sick. So let's talk a little bit more about the abilities that are included in the suit this time around. So you've got the big one, which is the ability to sprint, like actually sprint, which doesn't really happen in Halo games without the armor boost that you had in Halo 4 and 5, and to be honest, it is a much needed change. It's something that you should really just have as a staple in pretty much any first person shooter game, but I can also kind of understand their reason for not using it in the earlier games. But apart from that, all of the abilities are upgradable by using the Spartan cores that you collect throughout the game that we spoke about in the last part. They've also added the grappling gun. I know I've spoken about this a lot already in this video, but I honestly think it was the best thing that they've added to this game. Especially just because of the nature of the game, in the way that now it's got a lot more focus on exploration. Being given the tools with that specific focus really does make a big difference. It also has a major use during battles too, which is something incredible that they added. Like, you have the ability to upgrade it so it's electrified, so you can grapple onto people, shock them and keep them stunned, and then just kind of smack them in the face. It's so satisfying to do, and in all honesty it reminds me a lot of like the Just Cause games with like some mad space vibes, if you know what I mean. They've also added the shield core as an ability. This is just your shield as a Spartan. Obviously the more you upgrade it, the more shield capacity you have, so really it's kind of a no-brainer because it's going to stop you from dying all the time. They've also added a threat sensor, so this is basically like a little dart type thing that you can shoot out and it will show you where enemies are. This works around boxes, walls, and basically tries to give you like a tactical edge. I'll be completely honest and say I don't think I used this even once throughout the entire campaign, but I did complete the campaign on normal difficulty, and I can imagine that if you were to do another run on legendary, it would probably be a lot more useful, as it'll only take a few shots to take you out. They've also added in Dropballs, again something that I never really used, but these became a staple in the game later on as well. All it is basically like a big sheet of shield you drop onto the ground to create cover for yourself. Again, I think this will be more useful on a harder difficulty, but I personally just use the ones that the Banished set up. If we're being honest though, this was mainly so I could have my grappling hook always attached in the game for combat, but I do think that this is mostly up to the player preference. And then the final armor ability that has been added was the thrusters, so this is basically like a dodge button. This is something that I used, but mainly again towards the end of the game, and in all honesty, although it works a little faster than the grappling hook, it still has the same effect to kind of whack you out of harm's way. However, once you've upgraded the thrusters, it does become a lot more useful, making it even faster and allowing you to be boosted even further, and then adding a 4-second cloak, making it that little bit easier against tougher enemies or like bigger groups of enemies. Now, I feel like it would just be wrong to talk about a Halo game without bringing up one of the most important things for the franchise. That is the soundtrack. It's beautiful. Now, I know I say that a lot, but it honestly is just incredible. With every passing minute in the world, it really does just keep building and building. It makes it that much more, like, immersive. It goes from the classic Halo menu music all the way to, like, generic atmosphere in the game, and when the battles get more intense, the music builds with it, adding to a very fulfilling experience. It's probably one of the best things about the franchise, and if we're being totally honest, the voice acting in this game is also on point. There's a lot of things that you overhear, mainly like being the way that the Banished speak, and it really is great. They all still refer to the Master Chief as a demon, and when they kill you they always have something fun to say, which I honestly think just adds to the game in some way and makes dying that little bit less bad. Obviously there is no game that is without its issues, and the campaign for Halo Infinite is one of those. You'll be seeing throughout this video I had a couple of instances where the game's graphics just kind of broke. Like, I had a couple of stutters throughout the game, and these may not really occur on Xbox, but on the PC it did become a real issue. I even had to drop my graphics settings and nothing really helped, which was a little bit irritating. Like, there were a few small occasions where I would just die because the game stopped for a couple of seconds, and by the time it came back around I was dead, which in all honesty was just beyond frustrating. There were also a few moments where the game just decided that the enemies could become massive. They would start to distort and turn into like these weird lines or like weird triangle type things, and for the most part it wasn't really that much of a big deal because, you know, I could still see, but then sometimes they ended up being so large they took up a big portion of the screen, and it just led to me dying because I just couldn't see anything that was happening. It's also a massive problem that this game has basically, again, like most games in the past couple of years, has launched incomplete. There's still no co-op for the campaign, which is a staple within the Halo universe. In Halo 5, where they removed couch co-op, I was furious, but now they just haven't released it at all. It seems incredibly stupid in all honesty, but with the amount of time that this game has been postponed for, I can understand why they just released it anyway. It's a bit odd that the Xbox Series X launch title just wasn't available until over a year after the launch of the Series X, but you know, we move. And that brings us to the end of the campaign portion of the video. I just want to say thank you for making it this far, or for skipping ahead to hear about the multiplayer. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new, because it really helps us out over here. Now this section of the video is going to be considerably shorter than the latter, and that's mainly because I didn't get as much chance to play the multiplayer, and also it's quite generic in the form of it being a Halo game, but the multiplayer on this game is actually pretty good. They've managed to combine the few good aspects of Halo 5 and then all of the great parts of Halo 3 and just kind of smush them all together. The thing that really gave me the most enjoyment was playing the Fiesta Slayer game modes. Fiesta was great because you just always spawn with new weapons and a new armor mod, which honestly is a great way to mix up the gameplay. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not too great at Halo Online, but I still found it incredibly fun. They included lots of vehicles in most maps as well, so I'll add a clip of me going ape in a Scorpion, which is the Halo version of a tank, and honestly it was such a blast. But there does seem to be a few things missing. When the game launched, it obviously launched incomplete. They started with the multiplayer, but it was extremely bare bones. And then they launched a campaign in a month or so later. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand it, like I said earlier, but now the multiplayer has been out for a while and most of the classic game modes still weren't out. So the company have launched Halo Infinite multiplayer as a completely free-to-play thing, so they have obviously added in a paid season pass. To be honest, I don't really see an issue with this, as it is a business model that's proven to work. We've seen it with games like Warzone and Fortnite, and to be honest, if it's going to make them some extra money, then it's understandable, seeing as the game has launched completely free on Game Pass, which includes the campaign. But it's very fun to play. I just feel like they need to add more, because they're just not quite there yet, which, you know, it's fine, but hopefully soon enough we will see a bit more of an improvement. Thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought of the game or what other games you think I should look into, and it's been great. I'll see you next time.